Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to All Things Policy. Karnataka has long been seen as a leader in fiscal decentralization, giving local governments not just responsibilities but the money to carry them out. But is that changing? A recent Janaagraha report argues that Karnataka's cities are increasingly being squeezed financially, even as the state urbanizes rapidly. What is counted as devolution does not always translate into money reaching city governments. So, what exactly is happening to fiscal decentralization in Karnataka? To discuss this, I am joined by Manisha from Janaagraha. She is Associate Director, Public Finance Management at Janaagraha, and she's also the co-author of the report that I just mentioned about. We'll be sharing the report along with this episode. Hi, Manisha. Welcome to All Things Policy.
Hi, Sarthak. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So let's get to the report. The title of the report is A Slow Reversal of Karnataka's Fiscal Decentralization. What I noticed in this is the term reversal. Why did you choose the term reversal? Maybe you could have used slowdown or stagnation or something else.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sarthak. So we use the word reversal quite deliberately, right? And there was some discussion around this internally as well. A slowdown would have suggested that decentralization is continuing, but at a much slower pace. So the direction is still positive. But what we're seeing is that in some key dimensions, there's almost a movement in the opposite direction. If we take a step back, Karnataka has had a long history of being the leader in decentralization, right? Even before the 73rd, 74th Amendment. Back in 1983, Panchayati Raj reforms were nationally influenced by steps taken by Karnataka. So there was a fairly strong institutional tradition of giving local governments political and administrative responsibilities. Of course, at that point, it was a lot focused on rural because urban was not in the discourse in the shape or form it now should be. So in that sense, Karnataka has been that pioneer. And in this context, what prompted the word reversal is that some of the recent fiscal trends are not simply its case of slower growth, right? They are clearly moving backwards. If we look at untied grants that the state government is devolving to urban local governments, and those are recommended by the State Finance Commission, it has literally shrunk. It has gone from about 990 crore in financial year 2011-12 to 75 crore in financial year 26-27. And this is data available in the public domain. So Karnataka state government puts out an appendix on how much it is devolving to urban local governments with a disaggregation. It's one of the few states that do it. So you can see that this number has actually shrunk. And when you see what it means for cities, Mysore, which is where I'm from, used to receive a 43 crore in about 10 years back. Now it is receiving about 3 crores. So it's about a 90% reduction in some of these ULGs, and hence the word reversal in fiscal decentralization. So really, it's about the direction of travel. We are seeing less discretion and less fiscal autonomy for local governments than they had before, if I measure it using this.
So just wanted to again get some clarity on this, right? You mentioned about the untied grants part, but the tied grants, they remain a bulk of the transfers from the states to the local bodies, right? So around
Yes.
Total transfer is 34,000 crores. That is more or less, maybe 995 crores. If you subtract from 34,552 crores, that is something which the state government is devolving to the local bodies.
No, so that is not the case. So there is a little bit of we do see a difference between what is accepted on paper. And when I say on paper, it is the action taken report of the state government, which for the 5th SFC is in the public domain. For previous SFCs, it is not the case. It was not tabled in the assembly. It is not, at least we have not found it in the public domain. So when you look at the action taken report, if you compute 50% is what the state government says it will devolve to local governments. If you take the urban share of it, which is about 30%, roughly that comes up to about 34,000 crores. After some of the deductions which the state, I won't go into it, after some of the deductions which the state government has said it is going to allocate to other sort of welfare programs. So that estimated cost is 34,000. But actually what reaches the urban local government is around 4,972 crores. So there is problem number one, a vast difference between what the state government accepts on paper and what actually reaches urban local governments in terms of SFC grants. That is both tied and untied combined. Now, of this 4,900 crore, which is what reaches the urban local governments, I think now just about 2% is untied and the rest is all tied to salaries, electricity bills, etc. I'll come maybe a little bit later on what this actually means, but that's the overall landscape that we're looking at.
The urbanization rates in Karnataka is quite high, and it's around maybe 46%. The number of cities have increased, but the share for urban areas remains around 30%. So there seems to be a clear mismatch here. Urban areas possibly need more money. They're not getting it. Additionally, there's also a lot of money which is going to the parastatals, which should have been going to the city governments, but they're going to the parastatals. So somewhere there is not much correspondence between need and, again, how it is distributed. And also there is this violation of the subsidiarity principle, assignment principle. Ideally, the functions that should be delivered locally, they should be financed at the local level. But here, parastatals, which are typically under the state governments, are performing these roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of things, observations there, right? So the SFC in its own, there are two elements to this. Let me take a step back. One is what the State Finance Commission recommended to the state government in terms of what proportion of local government resources should go to urban vis-a-vis rural. So the SFC in its own submission to the 16th Union Finance Commission, because both were operating around the same time few months back, said that at least 40 to 45% of the union, whatever the union pot is to local governments, of that at least 40 to 45% should go to urban because of overall higher levels of urbanization. But in its own recommendation, it pegged it down to 25%, right? So we see a contradiction almost, or the SFC itself holding itself back in what it's recommending to the state government, which is a severe issue, and it is not in line with overall urbanization trends that you see. Then you see the state government's response, which is sort of to say, okay, I won't make it 25%, but I'll make it 30%. So all of this seems a little bit of an adjustment here and there, but not necessarily recognizing how important urban has become, and both from the side of the State Finance Commission as well as state governments in this case. It is a similar, so you see in two cases that the state government has responded with a little bit of a hesitation to devolve to local governments almost. You see that the state government at one level has taken away a significant portion of money that it is counting as devolution to flagship welfare programs such as Anna Bhagya Griha Lakshmi. The other place where it is doing this is taking away money to parastatals, but it is calling it devolution.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about this. I'll come to this in a bit. Sure, but before that, since you mentioned about the State Finance Commission grants, I would also assume that cities have their own resources, right? So, they have the capacity to maybe raise property taxes, user charges, different kinds of rental income. So they have those things, right? Avenues. So how important are these grants for the cities?
Overall, urban local governments in Karnataka, if we look at the numbers, there is a significant reliance on grants, both Union Finance Commission grants and State Finance Commission grants, right? In a small city, almost 70-75% of reliance is on SFC grants alone. If larger cities, that comes somewhere around 40%. Now, a lot of this reliance is because the SFC grants include salaries, electricity bills, which are a huge part of what a ULG's expenditure is. But even that aside, there is a significant, if you're a small town today, the own source revenues that you're raising, and for a whole range of factors. Some of these are also controlled by the rate state government set, etc. Right? So own source revenues, there is a limited capability to increase own source revenues by and of themselves. And hence, there is a great reliance on grants. So 40 to 70%, depending on the size of the city, is a large number in terms of reliance of grants. A lot of small towns, you do see that the only flexible money they have to spend on creation of assets, that is your roads, your parks, etc., are predominantly coming from either state finance commission grants or union finance commission grants. So that reliance is quite high, which makes it quite important.
So basically, there is a high reliance on the grants, and which makes devolution a very important thing, which also implies that if the devolution is not being done properly, then it can lead to cities finding it difficult to provide different services. And in this context, your paper has an interesting finding, and which you were also mentioning some time back, that there are certain schemes, policies which have been introduced by the state government. The spending on that is being counted as devolution. So is this some form of creative accounting, or is this some form of fiscal stress at the state level that is finding some least resistance path? Are there any more such instances that you find?
Yeah, thanks. You bring up a really important point, Sarthak. And definitely it is fiscal stress finding a path, right? But there is a genuine fiscal constraint in Karnataka. Even if you read the CAG report, it has documented that revenue expenditure at the state level is growing much faster than revenue receipts, right? And welfare programs such as Annabhagya, etc., are putting a significant pressure on states' finances. But the fact of the matter is that fiscal stress cannot change the definition of devolution, right? So it is as much about fiscal stress as much as it is about the lack of accountability in a sense. So the welfare programs are critical, but this money is going directly to households. It does not go to an elected local government, which can actually decide what I do with this money. And that is what should count as devolution, only if it is going to elected governments for them to plan around it and decide what they want to do with it and how they respond to a city's needs, right? So calling finances that are going to welfare programs as devolution to local governments makes the fiscal position of these cities and towns look much stronger than it actually is. And the action taken report does not even justify why such welfare programs that bypass elected councils are counted as devolution. It is just asserted if you look at it. And the difference is also huge, right? The quantum, the magnitude of resources that are allocated to these welfare programs is also huge, which is what in the report, attributes that difference between 34,052 crore and 4,972 crore. That difference is largely because of the allocation to welfare programs. And the honest response would have been to renegotiate the devolution percentage transparently. Instead, it keeps that headline number intact and redefines what counts inside it, right? So that is where I think the creative accounting remark is also coming. Both are true, but it is just not the solution. The solution is not what the government has done. And to the extent that we know, we don't see any such parallels in other states, right? I won't say it's unique to Karnataka, but from what we've seen, it appears that Karnataka is maybe one of the few states, or to the best of our knowledge, Karnataka is the only place where we have seen this happen, at least. Yeah.
So this kind of reminds me of the fiscal equivalence principle, right? Ideally, the jurisdiction that benefits from a service, from a local public good, or bears the cost of a local public good, they should decide how it is being spent, because they have better information about things, right? They have better information about the local preferences. But here, the jurisdiction that is spending is the state government. Again, they don't know what exactly is the preferences of people at the local government level. Also, something that I have talked about in previous podcasts also, this Mixelian connection. Usually accountability is strong when there's an overlap between three things: who pays, who decides, who benefits. So ideally, the local governments, they should be the one deciding, they should be possibly raising the money, and the beneficiaries over there are the people. But here that again is kind of muddled. You're getting a service from those state level schemes, but again, city government has no say in that. As you mentioned, the elected councils, they have no role in that. Somewhere accountability also gets impacted, as a result of which quality of different services will also get impacted. Also, the money that should have gone to local things are not happening. And since you're mentioning about other states, right, you haven't seen any such parallel. And in the beginning, we talked about how Karnataka was considered to be a leading state when it comes to decentralization efforts. Right now, how does Karnataka perform compared to its peer states, maybe a Kerala, maybe Tamil Nadu? How does it perform?
Yeah, not so great, to be honest. If we compared it with few other states where data was available in the public domain, right? And at least among these comparable states, Haryana, Odisha, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, we do see that Karnataka ranks last among these comparable states that we looked at. So if we take per capita allocation of State Finance Commission grants to urban local governments, we see that for Karnataka, this figure is about 2,244 rupees per person. Now compare it with 6,251 in Kerala. It's about 4,504 in Haryana. So it's at least between Kerala and Karnataka itself, it's about 2.5, 3 times more almost in per capita terms. What is more concerning is also the trend, right? So if we compare between 2 years, so we took financial year 18-19 and financial year 26-27, the jump, the increase in per capita terms, the allocation increase is much higher in Tamil Nadu and Odisha, where we've seen over a 200% increase, right? In Karnataka, this is just about 25%. So that means that other states are increasing the fiscal space available to their cities at a much faster rate than Karnataka is. And somewhere, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it also slightly relates to your previous question as well, right? In what Karnataka is doing, there is this sort of underlying reading is that there is a tendency to think of devolution as a zero-sum transfer, right? If the state gives 1 rupee more to the city, then the state has 1 rupee less. So that is true in the immediate budget, and the political trade-off also of that is real, but not necessarily true in the longer term, right? So cities are where economic activity happens. So if these funds are spent well, as in if you are transferring predictable resources to urban local governments, it will lead in the long term to a greater pie for the state as well overall, which responds a little bit to the fiscal stress question as well, right? So there is a virtuous cycle that it will set in motion. But for that, the conversation needs to shift a little bit to, okay, there are predictable resources that ULGs have access to. How do we enable cities to improve outcomes with the funds that they have, so that that virtuous cycle is set in motion? How can cities hold ULGs accountable to spend that money, which also is response to that accountability question. But for all this, they first need to have funds. And that's sort of, if I give 1 rupee, I have 1 rupee less to spend on what are my state priorities. That sort of thinking needs to shift a little bit. Which is really a long-term thing.
Yeah, so there are two observations here, right? First is the point that you mentioned. You need to prioritize cities because cities contribute a lot to the economy. And right now we're thinking about, maybe the states think it is a zero-sum game. So usually, I mean, cities have been the engines of growth. A lot of people think that, okay, rural areas, we should develop them. But typically what we observe is cities contribute massively to the economy, to the GDP. And because of the agglomeration effects that you find in the cities, exchange of ideas, exchange of, again, you will find people together in one place. Densification has its own benefits. The second thing is, as per capita transfers have not increased, and which somewhere also leads to the predictability and periodicity of transfers getting impacted, which implies that incurring capital expenditure by the city governments might become difficult because they would prefer to have a need-based, something stable, some rule-based multi-year flows, which is not happening here maybe. So if capital expenditure is not happening, then again, cities becoming better, providing better services, accommodating more people also gets ruined. Now, since you mentioned about State Finance Commission and how the negotiations between State Finance Commission happens with the state governments, what about their reports? I have one question on the State Finance Commission. So right now, Karnataka is on its 5th State Finance Commission. Some other states, peer states, they are in the on their seventh State Finance Commission. The fifth State Finance Commission also got multiple extension. So what it feels like is, does the State Finance Commission have the capacity? Does it have the ability to plan, or does it have the capacity to push back on the government?
I think the problem is less whether a state finance commission can push back and more whether we have designed the institution to have this authority, right? Today, there is no legal backing, at least in Karnataka, there is no legal backing that provides state finance commission a stable 18 to 24 months term, which is the core. It should not be that an SFC has members that are strong enough that will push the government back. It should be an institution that has a certain kind of authority and legal backings for it. Now, having said that, there is no, even at the union level, Union Finance Commission don't have a legal backing. Neither the constitution nor there is a law that says UFCs should be constituted for a period of X number of years. But it happens like clockwork. You would not imagine a world where Union Finance Commission's term is getting extended every 6 months, right? Why? Because you have state governments, political and administrative leadership holding the union governments accountable. There is that kind of weight that state governments have. But there is no equivalent pushing state governments to empower state finance commissions, right? You don't have, today we are not in a situation where urban local government or Panchayati Raj institution elected representatives have the institutional access to state decision makers, to state chief ministers, to hold them accountable that why are state finance commissions not set up on time? Why are they getting multiple 6-month extensions? So this is that larger question. You will see in the news that you have chief ministers going and meeting union governments if UFC recommendations are not implemented for issues of how much resources are flowing to states. You don't see that at the state level in terms of third-tier government holding the second tier of government accountable. So there is a little bit of that as well.
Since we talked about State Finance Commission, there is also a role of Union Finance Commission. You didn't mention about it. So Union Finance Commission also provides grants to cities, right? Now, the 16th Finance Commission, it has tripled urban grants. But again, there are some conditions attached to that, that cities need to have elected municipal councils. And as we know, elections in Bangalore haven't happened for a long time now. And the same applies for many other places in Karnataka. So do you think this incentive is going to work? Elections will now happen?
In theory, it is a very strong incentive, but you're right that in practice, so far it has not been enough. It has not been enough in Karnataka, at least. As you alluded to it, Karnataka, specifically BBMP, has lost about 964 crore just in terms of 15th Finance Commission grants over the period of, I think, 4 to 5 years because of the absence of elected local governments. They've not conducted elections, they've not received 15th FC grants. And you're right, it appears that this does not matter. With the tripling of money, the hope is that it will act as an incentive. The issue here is also that the penalty is on urban local governments, but the onus to take action is on the state, right? So now sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work. I think there has to be a tipping point at which they start. It starts to matter. Hopefully, the increase in magnitude will be that tipping point, but let's see. With the State Finance Commission, because the other condition that the UFC grants have is state finance commissions need to be in place or recommendations have to be in place in order for urban local governments to receive grants. There we do see during the 15th FC period some improvement, right? States which had typically not constituted SFCs for many years started constituting SFCs. Now, of course, they were on paper. The quality of recommendations, to what extent it was taken up, is debatable, but something happened. Now, specifically in Karnataka with the elections condition, we don't see that shift yet.
So we have been talking a lot about the issues with Karnataka's decentralization. So what do you think can be some solution to these issues?
Yeah, that's the solution. The devil is in the solutions. three key things come to mind, right? One is, if I simply have to bracket it, it would be money, mandate, and accountability, right? When I say money, it is what I touched upon earlier as well. In urban, I mean, if we take a step back and look at the national landscape, right? Urban India is contributing what, roughly 2/3 of the GDP. But if we see the proportion of union and state resources that is going to urban India, it is minuscule. We don't even have that number, but it is very minimum. So that proportion is so skewed, and predictable financial resources is required if we need that sort of engine to work the way it needs to work. The 16th Finance Commission report also calls this, right? They push for a rules-based, predictable devolution, and they've also raised the urban share of local body grants to 45%. It was about 36% under 15th FC in terms of urban to rural share. So, I mean, number one in terms of way forward is really restoring that predictability for urban local governments, specifically in Karnataka. Schemes can't do this, right? We say that there are a lot of state schemes, national schemes. Schemes don't give that fiscal discretion that is necessary, that will allow local democracy to be strengthened. When elected governments have financial resources, there is an entire push and pull that happens at the third tier of government in terms of resource allocation, citizens holding local governments accountable. All of that sort of goes away when it is schemes and when ULGs are treated as implementing agencies and not the third tier of government. And that is where it's not just, oh, there'll be more money and it will solve all the problems. There is a certain cycle that will set in motion, and hence that sort of emphasis on predictable financial resources. So how does that happen? I do think there is a need for greater public discourse around it. Half of policy making happens with pressure from the public, and CSOs, I mean, ourselves, people like ourselves, for example, have a great role to play in this. There is not enough conversation today on sort of ensuring, one, predictable financial resources, and two, accountability for it, right? So I'll just go to the accountability part of the solution as well. Can we have better quality city-wise data on how much was allocated, how much was released, how much was spent, what projects were undertaken, and what outcomes were achieved? That entire loop is sort of missing in urban today. In fact, to a great extent, rural has done significantly better here. Narega set in motion some of these wheels, and other schemes have also caught on. Today, you go to many parts of rural India, you do see boards at least saying what is allocated, what was spent. You don't see, when I'm walking in my neighborhood, roads are dug up. I don't see any board that says this is what is happening, how much is this costing. So who do I hold accountable? If there is money, there is no money. So a lot of these questions are also about accountability. That is one strand of accountability. The second strand is really, if we need to strengthen state finance commissions as institutions that will ensure predictability in financial resources, there has to be some level of accountability there as well, right? State government, one, has to sort of take action on setting up state finance commissions on time, the necessary legal amendments for this, but also what happens after these reports are submitted. Today, Karnataka, as I said earlier as well, action taken reports are not tabled in the assembly at all. So can action taken reports be tabled in the assembly within 6 months of a state finance commission submitting its report? Can the action taken report actually provide justification for why certain decisions were rejected, certain recommendations were accepted? Can it provide a timeline for implementation, not just for financial reforms, right, but also governance reforms, which are, again, key to ensuring money is spent well? And all of this, again, will not happen by itself. And this, again, brings me back to the question of public discourse and what CSOs can do. Can there be greater sort of just greater information on comparisons across states on how much state governments are devolving to local governments. Today, it's very difficult to piece together a national landscape of what kind of devolution is taking place from union and state to local governments. So that element of accountability that will perhaps ensure state finance commissions are strengthened and their recommendations are taken up. At a slightly larger level, in terms of the mandate, money alone won't fix this. And Karnataka, holds true for other states as well, but the state needs to move from local governments being implementing agencies for state schemes towards being governments that can actually plan and manage their cities. And that also means addressing the role of parastatals, which we alluded to earlier. Can city governments be the fulcrum? Can they be that place-based governance and fulcrum of parastatals are responding to the demands of city governments and delivering on projects, which will also resolve some of these issues of how much money is going to city governments. So I think some of these are specific things that need to happen. Some are slightly more 10,000, 50,000 feet recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Manisha, for this. In fact, when you mentioned about city governments are right now, in fact, they're not called city governments, they're usually called urban local bodies or something, right?
Yes.
So the perception about city governments is, again, they're implementing agencies. And since they have to implement something which state governments or urban governments have done, so that perception also matters. And something that I always keep wondering, in India, we don't have movies which are on the life of mayors, or but you'll have many of the movies, English movies, Hollywood movies, which have those kind of characters, because it seems to be a role which has a lot of authority, power. So that thing again needs to change. And as you were mentioning,
it's not just movies. I have watched interviews of Mamdani and different folks.
Yeah, the elections in India also, people were watching the debates and all those things, right? When you had New York elections, mayoral elections, and so again the point about public discourse that needs to change. And I think Janaagraha also has done something related to that. You have a dashboard which talks about the different finances. More such thing we need to have. So again, to our listeners, right, those who.
It's not just about dashboards, right? It is about, can we then take that and
hold the account.
Hold them accountable, but also translate it as key messages to decision makers. If it is then not completing that cycle, that also becomes an issue.
Yeah. So to our listeners, in case you have something interesting, maybe you can chip in. See, the idea is the health of our cities depends on the health of the local governments, and cities in India don't do great. So if we want better roads, we want cleaner streets, better public services, then the city governments need to have money, autonomy, accountability. So let's put local governments, fiscal decentralization at the center of all the conversation. Thanks, Manisha, for joining us. Thanks to the listeners for tuning in. We'll share this report along with this episode. Thank you, Manisha.
Thanks, Sarthak. Thank you so much, Sarthak.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.